The child was barefoot, trembling under the harsh afternoon sun, surrounded by laughter that cut sharper than stones. People passed without slowing, some recording, others mocking, until one man stopped. Patrick Tshisekedi, a powerful CEO accustomed to command and silence, felt his breath leave him as his eyes locked onto the necklace hanging from the boy's thin neck. He knew that necklace. He had clasped it around his ex-wife's neck with shaking hands many years ago, on a night filled with promises that never survived the morning. Now it rested against the chest of a homeless child, dirty, hungry, unwanted. The crowd pushed the boy away. The boy looked back defiant and afraid, and in that instant Patrick understood. This was not coincidence. This was a wound that had never healed, coming back to demand the truth. Before we continue, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? If stories about justice, healing, and hidden truths move you, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for what comes next. Patrick Tshisekedi did not remember deciding to stop the car. One moment his driver was easing the black sedan away from the glass tower where his company's logo crowned the skyline. The next, Patrick's hand lifted sharp and instinctive, palm forward. Stop! The car slowed amid horns and heat. Outside, the city breathed in layers, diesel fumes, sweat-fried plantain, the sharp cries of hawkers competing with the metallic hum of traffic. It was an ordinary afternoon in a city that had taught itself to keep moving, no matter who fell behind. Patrick had learned that lesson early and mastered it well. He had learned how to keep meetings efficient, emotions contained, losses buried. He had learned how to look past faces without names. Until now. Across the street, the boy stood with his back straight, shoulders too thin for his age, chin lifted in a way that looked like defiance, but felt more like exhaustion. He couldn't have been more than 10. His shorts were frayed, his shirt faded to a color that no longer remembered its origin. He was arguing with a vendor twice his size, placing himself between the man's raised hand and two younger children crouched beside a crate of tomatoes. "Go!" the vendor snapped. "All of you, before I call the police." The boy shook his head. He said something Patrick couldn't hear, but his posture did the talking. He spread his arms slightly, blocking the smaller ones behind him. One of the younger girls tugged at his shirt, eyes wide, lips trembling. Patrick leaned forward. The city narrowed until it was only the boy, the vendor's hand hovering, and that thin glint at the boy's chest. The necklace. It caught the light as the boy moved just a flicker, a familiar curve of metal against dark skin. Patrick's heart thudded once hard enough to feel like a blow. He knew the weight of that chain. He knew the way the clasp clicked when you pressed it closed. He knew the engraving hidden where only fingers would find it. He had chosen it carefully. He had saved it for a woman who believed promises could still be kept. Elise. He breathed a name he had not spoken aloud in years. The driver glanced back, confused. Sir Patrick didn't answer. He was already opening the door. The street swallowed him immediately. Heat pressed against his suit. Eyes turned. A few phones lifted. People recognized him not by name, perhaps, but by posture, by the way space seemed to bend around him. Patrick Tshisekedi did not walk unnoticed. He had built a life that made sure of that. The boy saw him then. Their eyes met for half a second. In that instant, the boy's defiance cracked into something raw and alert. He took in Patrick's clothes, the car, the way people paused. He did not wait to be spoken to. He ran. "Wait!" Patrick called the word, tearing from him before strategy could catch it. The boy darted through a gap between stools, bare feet, slapping the pavement. One of the smaller children cried out. The vendor cursed. Patrick broke into a jog that felt absurd in polished shoes. His breath tight, not from exertion but from urgency he did not understand yet. He chased a child through a market that did not care who he was. Security moved late, as security often did when surprise outran protocol. Two men stepped from the car, calling Patrick's name, scanning for threats. But Patrick waved them off without looking back. He kept his eyes on the flash of that necklace, the way it bounced against a rib cage too narrow for it. The boy, cut left then right, then vanished under a canopy of fabric into a tighter lane, where the air thickened and the crowd pressed close. Patrick followed, ignoring the sting of elbows, the murmurs of irritation. He felt ridiculous and unstoppable all at once. Quito. A woman shouted somewhere ahead. Quito, slow down. The name landed in Patrick's chest. The boy. Quito glanced back, misjudged his step, and stumbled. He caught himself with his hands scraped and dusty, then sprang up again, fear blazing now. He reached for the necklace, instinctively, fingers closing around it as if it were armor. Patrick slowed. He raised his hands, palms open, the universal sign of peace that had never worked very well in boardrooms, but might he hoped mean something here. "I'm not here to hurt you," Patrick said, loud enough to carry, soft enough not to chase him further. "I just want to talk." Quito hesitated. The crowd had gathered now, drawn by motion and curiosity. Some recognized Patrick. Whispers moved like insects. "That's him," someone said. "The big man. Why is he chasing that street boy?" Phones came out again. Quito's eyes flicked over the faces, measuring risk, the way children on the street learn to do early. His jaw set. He turned to run again. "Please," Patrick said, and the word surprised him with its honesty. "That necklace, where did you get it?" That stopped the boy. The name of the object mattered. The interest mattered. Quito turned slowly, suspicion carved deep into his small face. He did not answer right away. He did not smile or soften. He looked older than he was. Older than he should have been allowed to be. "It's mine," Quito said finally. "Don't touch it. I don't want to take it," Patrick said. He swallowed. "I've seen it before." Quito's shoulders tensed. He took a step back, angling his body protectively, like he had done with the smaller children earlier. "Everyone wants something," he said. "You too." The words stung because they were true, often enough to have weight. Patrick nodded once. "You're right," he said. "I do want something. I want to know how it came to you." Before Quito could answer, one of Patrick's security men pushed through the crowd, voice firm and misplaced. "Sir, this isn't safe. We should move." The word "safe" changed the air. A few people laughed. Others bristled. Safety was a currency not evenly distributed here. Quito took advantage of the distraction. He turned and bolted again. This time security reacted fast. Too fast. They closed in at the mouth of the lane, blocking his path. Quito skidded to a stop, eyes wild. Someone grabbed his arm. The crowd's mood shifted, curiosity curdling into judgment. "Thief," a man muttered. "He stole something from the big man," another said louder. Quito struggled, panic breaking through his composure. "I didn't steal," he shouted. "Let me go." Patrick felt the moment tilt towards something ugly. He stepped forward sharply. "Enough," he said. His voice carried authority that cut through noise. The grip on Quito's arm loosened. Patrick moved between the boy and the men without thinking about optics or danger. He crouched, bringing himself level with Quito's eyes. "I told you," Patrick said, meeting the boy's glare. "I'm not here to hurt you." Quito's chest heaved. His fingers were white around the chain. "Then leave me alone," he said, "and leave my family alone." "Family!" Patrick's breath caught. He looked past Quito to where the two younger children huddled, watching him, with terror and hope tangled together. He looked back at the boy in front of him, carrying a weight that did not belong to him. Alone. "I won't," Patrick said quietly. "Not today." He straightened and faced the crowd. "This child has done nothing wrong," he said. "Anyone who says otherwise answers to me." Silence followed, thick and uneasy. Quito did not thank him. He did not smile. He took a step back, eyes never leaving Patrick's face. "This necklace," he said, voice low, now steady. "It was my mother's." The words fell between them and stayed there. Patrick felt the city rush back into focus, the noise, the heat, the watching eyes, but something had shifted underneath it all. The ground he stood on was no longer solid. It was memory and possibility and fear braided together. "Your mother," Patrick echoed. Quito nodded once. Her name was Elise. Patrick's knees threatened to give way. For a moment, Patrick Tshisekedi could only hear the blood inside his own ears. The market sounds, vendors calling radios, crackling traffic, groaning fell behind a curtain. The boy's mouth had formed the name as if it were ordinary, as if it didn't belong to the most guarded corner of Patrick's life. Elise. Patrick stared at Quito, searching for a trick, for a scam, for the quick calculation street kids used when they sensed money. But Quito's eyes held none of that. They held wariness. Yes, pride. A kind of bruised dignity. And something else, an ache that had learned to stand upright so it wouldn't collapse. Around them, the crowd tightened. People smelled drama the way they smelled roasted corn. Phones hovered. Someone whispered Patrick's name like a prayer or a warning. Security shifted uncomfortably. One of the men, tall with a squared jaw, leaned close to Patrick. "Sir, we should go. This is turning into a scene." It already was. A woman with a baby strapped to her back pushed forward, eyes sharp. "Big man," she called, half mocking, half curious. "Is this your child?" Laughter sputtered. A few men grinned as if the question were entertainment. Patrick didn't answer her. He was watching Quito, who flinched at the laughter, as if he'd been hit. The boy's fingers tightened around the chain again. He lifted his chin, refusing to look small. Patrick lowered his voice. "Where is your mother?" Quito's gaze flicked toward the two younger children, and then back. "Not here," he said. "She's gone." Gone where Patrick pressed careful, as if the wrong tone could shatter whatever fragile bridge had formed. Quito's lips curled with bitterness. Like everyone. Like people who promise things. The words landed too close to Patrick's own guilt. He swallowed. "Who told you her name?" Patrick asked. "How do you know she was called Elise Quito's?" Eyes narrowed. "She told me," he said, as if the question were insulting. Before she didn't come back." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people leaned in hungry. Others rolled their eyes, certain this was just another street story. One of Patrick's security men, eager to control the narrative, stepped forward and tried to take charge. "Listen, boy," he said, voice stern. "You can't just say names like that. If you stole that necklace," Quito recoiled, anger flashing. "I didn't steal!" he shouted. The lane erupted. People talked over one another. Someone pointed at Quito's dirty clothes and shook their head with disgust. Another person said, "These street boys lie for money." A woman muttered, "They'll say anything when they see a rich man." Phones rose higher. Patrick's pulse spiked. He saw how fast a crowd could turn truth into a spectacle. How easily a child could be swallowed by public judgment. He had watched similar dynamics in boardrooms, rumors shaping decisions faster than facts, but this was more dangerous because it carried the weight of violence. "Enough," Patrick said again, louder. His voice snapped through the noise. Security stiffened. The crowd quieted, not from respect alone, but from curiosity. What would the powerful CEO do now? Patrick stepped forward, shoulders squared. "No one is accusing this child of stealing," he said, looking straight at the security man. "Not today, not in my presence." The guard opened his mouth, then closed it. He stepped back. Quito watched Patrick with suspicion that had deep roots. He didn't relax. He didn't trust kindness. He had likely seen men perform kindness in public and cruelty in private. Patrick turned his attention to the two younger children behind Quito. They were huddled close together. A girl and a smaller boy, both thin, both wary. The girl's hair was braided in neat rows that had grown out, suggesting someone had once cared enough to do it properly. Patrick's voice softened. "Are they with you?" Quito moved as if to block the question. "They're mine," he said. Patrick blinked. "Your siblings." Quito shook his head sharply. "No, not blood, but mine. I feed them. I watch them. If I leave, they disappear." Patrick understood what disappear meant here. Not a magical vanishing, a harsh one. A hush fell again, this time heavier. Even the crowd's amusement dimmed a little. Patrick crouched once more, careful not to loom. He pulled a folded handkerchief from his pocket, white linen clean, and held it out. "Your hands are bleeding," he said. Quito stared at it like it was a trap. "I'm fine. You're not," Patrick said gently. "You fell." Quito's jaw clenched. He did not take the handkerchief. Patrick didn't force it. He placed it on the ground between them and withdrew his hand. It felt like offering peace, without demanding acceptance. Quito's eyes flicked to the handkerchief, then away. Pride was a shelter. So was mistrust. Asha Mwangi arrived then, stepping out of the car with purpose. She was tall. Her hair pulled back her face, composed the way women learned to be, when they worked beside powerful men and refused to be diminished by them. She had been on her way to a meeting across town, but Patrick's driver had called her the moment Patrick ordered the car to stop. Asha took in the scene in one sweep. Patrick in the middle of a crowd, security tense, a homeless boy staring him down. She didn't panic. She didn't scold. She moved like someone who understood that dignity was the first language here. "Sir," she said quietly, coming to Patrick's side. "What's happening?" Patrick didn't take his eyes off Quito. "He has Elise's necklace," he said, voice low. Asha's expression shifted, subtle, but Patrick saw it. She knew that name. Anyone close to Patrick knew. Elise was the ghost that no one mentioned in meetings. Asha looked at Quito with new attention. She didn't pity him. She simply saw him. Quito, Patrick said, testing the name again. "I need you to come with me. Not because you've done anything wrong. Because we need to talk safely." Quito's laugh came out sharp, humorless. "Safely," he echoed. "You mean in your big building, with your guards?" Patrick felt the accusation underneath it. He nodded slowly. "Somewhere you can eat," he said. "Somewhere these kids can rest." Quito glanced at the younger ones. His face flickered. Conflict, fear, responsibility. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "I don't go with strangers." "Not again." The last two words were quieter, but they hit Patrick like a stone. "Not again." Patrick's mind tried to connect pieces. Elise, disappearance, a child on the streets with her necklace, and now a fear that sounded like history. A man in the crowd shouted, "Leave him." "He will rob you, big man," another voice yelled. "He's playing you." The noise rose again like a wave. Quito flinched, then straightened, anger forcing him upright. "Let them talk," Quito snapped. "They always talk." Patrick stood, eyes sweeping the crowd. He saw the hunger for humiliation. He saw how easily people punished the poor to convince themselves they were safe. He knew this cruelty. He had benefited from systems built on it. Asha stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Everyone move back," she said. "Give the child space." A few people hesitated, surprised to be commanded by a woman. But Asha's authority was quiet and undeniable. She didn't threaten. She simply held her ground. Some stepped back, others lingered. Quito looked at Asha differently. Then he looked at Patrick. Not trusting, but less defensive. Asha's gaze did not carry ownership. She crouched, mirroring Patrick's earlier posture, but she spoke to Quito like an equal. "You don't have to come with us," she said. "But you also don't have to stay here and be torn apart by people who don't know you." Quito's eyes hardened. "I'm used to it." "I can see that," Asha said softly. "And I'm sorry you had to get used to it." That sentence did something. Quito's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes blinked too fast once, like he was pushing something back. Patrick watched, learning something uncomfortable. Sometimes his power was not the thing that reached people. Sometimes it was simple recognition. Quito's voice came out smaller for a second. "They're hungry," he said, nodding toward the younger kids without looking at them. "If I leave, they don't eat." Patrick's chest tightened. He reached into his pocket, pulled out cash too much for a meal enough to start trouble, and then stopped himself. He remembered Quito's pride. He remembered the way money could turn kindness into humiliation. Instead, Patrick looked at Asha. "Can you do it?" he asked quietly. Asha nodded once. She stood and gestured to one of the security men. "You," she said. "Go to that food stall, buy meals, water. Don't argue, don't act like you're doing charity. Just pay." The guard hesitated, then obeyed. Quito watched all of it, suspicion still there, but now mixed with something like cautious curiosity. Patrick took a slow breath. "Quito," Patrick said, "I'm going to ask you one question, and you can choose not to answer, but I need to ask it." Quito lifted his chin. "Ask." Patrick's voice was low, steady, even though his insides were shaking. "When was the last time you saw your mother?" Quito's fingers tightened around the necklace. His eyes dropped for the first time just for a heartbeat to the chain, as if it could tell him what to say. 3 years, he whispered. Patrick's vision blurred. 3 years ago, Elise had already been gone far longer than that. Gone from Patrick's life, gone from the city, gone from every contact and record Patrick had been able to access. If Quito had seen her 3 years ago, then Elise had been alive. She had been here. She had been hiding. Patrick's mouth went dry, where he asked. Quito looked up again, defiant, returning like a shield. "If I tell you," he said, "you'll take it from me. Like the others." Patrick felt the weight of those words. The others. He glanced at Asha, who was watching Quito with concern. The security man returned with steaming plastic containers and bottles of water, trying not to look like he was performing. Quito didn't rush for the food. He waited until the younger kids had it first. He watched them eat like a guard at a gate, only relaxing a fraction when he saw them chewing. Patrick stood there, a man who owned towers and contracts, realizing he had never earned the right to ask for a child's trust. He reached slowly into his inner pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he slid out an old photo he had kept for reasons he pretended were practical. Elise smiled in the picture. Her head tilted, sunlight caught in her eyes. Around her neck, unmistakable, was the necklace. Patrick held the photo out, not toward Quito's hands, but where Quito could see it without feeling cornered. Quito's eyes widened, and for the first time the boy's face truly looked like a child's. You know her," Quito breathed. Patrick's voice trembled. "I did," he said, "and I think I still do in ways I don't deserve." Quito stared at the photo, then at Patrick, then down at the necklace, as if the world had suddenly become too heavy to carry. "I'm not going anywhere," Patrick said quietly. "Not until we find the truth." Quito swallowed hard. Then, he whispered, eyes shining with anger and fear and something dangerously close to hope. "Then don't lie to me." Patrick nodded, slow and solemn. "I won't." But even as he said it, somewhere deep inside him, Patrick felt the shadow of an old power stirring, an enemy with long reach, one who did not like buried secrets being touched. That night, Patrick Tshisekedi did not go home. His driver took him instead to the apartment he rarely used anymore. A quiet place overlooking the river, chosen years ago for its privacy rather than comfort. Patrick dismissed security at the door, ignoring their concern, and stood alone in the dim living room while the city pulsed below him. The silence pressed in heavier than the noise of the market had been. Elise's name echoed in his head, not as a memory but as a presence. He poured a glass of water and forgot to drink it. He sat, stood paced. The image of Quito's face, guarded, proud, exhausted, kept returning, stitched together with Elise's smile from the photograph. 3 years. Elise had been alive 3 years ago. Patrick opened his laptop and typed her name again and again as if repetition could pull her back through the screen. He searched records he had once believed exhaustive: travel logs, hospital admissions, employment histories. He expanded the radius. He searched neighboring cities, rural clinics, faith-based shelters. Each result was a door that opened to nothing. He leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the past rise the way it always did when he was tired. He remembered Elise the first time he met her in a crowded hall during a fundraiser he had attended out of obligation. She had been standing alone near a window, observing rather than performing her posture, calm, her eyes thoughtful. She had asked him one question that night, not about money or power, but about responsibility. "What do you owe the people who never get to sit at this table?" she had asked. He had laughed, then impressed, intrigued. He had answered something polished and safe. She had smiled politely, unconvinced. Their marriage had begun with that tension, his ambition, her insistence on conscience. At first he believed love would smooth it out. He believed his success would protect them both. He did not understand how power attracted predators. Coffee Bemba had entered their lives gradually, like damp seeping into walls. He had been a friend of the family, a connector, a man who knew how to open doors in places Patrick could not. When Patrick's company needed permits fast-tracked, Kofi made calls. When political resistance arose, Kofi mediated. Elise had disliked him immediately. "He looks at people like assets," she had said once after Kofi left their home, "not like humans." Patrick had dismissed it as intuition without evidence. He had been wrong more often than he admitted. Their arguments had grown sharper as Patrick's influence expanded. Elise began volunteering quietly, visiting clinics and shelters Patrick had never seen. She stopped attending certain functions. She grew guarded, distracted. When Patrick pressed her, she would say, "Some truths are dangerous before they're ready." The night Elise left the fight had been small, almost trivial. Words about schedules, about trust, about his absence. Patrick had gone to sleep angry, and certain they would talk it out in the morning. By morning, Elise was gone. She had left no note. Her phone went dead by noon. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Patrick had mobilized resources quietly, at first, then loudly. He had hired investigators. He had asked favors. He had begged people who had never seen him beg. Nothing came back. Elise had evaporated. Eventually, the world moved on. The press framed it as abandonment. A beautiful woman leaving a powerful man. A cautionary tale or a romantic mystery, depending on who told it. Patrick let the story harden into something he could live with. Elise had chosen to leave. Until today. Patrick opened a new file and typed a single word at the top: Elise. He began listing dates, places, people. He noted the last time she had been seen publicly. The last hospital she had visited, according to charity records he found buried in a report. His hands shook as he typed. He added another heading beneath it: child. If Elise had been pregnant, she had hidden it well, or someone had helped her hide it. Patrick picked up his phone and called Asha Mwangi. She answered on the second ring. "I was waiting for you to call," she said. "Tell me everything you know," Patrick said. "Not what you think I want to hear. Everything." Asha was quiet for a moment. "I know Elise didn't leave you the way people said," she said carefully. "I didn't have proof then, but I had questions. She came to my office once years ago. She didn't say much, just asked about safe houses, about legal protections for women who needed to disappear." Patrick's chest tightened. "You never told me. You were surrounded by men who benefited from you." "Not knowing," Asha replied gently. "And I was young in the company. I didn't know how deep it went." Patrick closed his eyes. "Kofi," he said. "Yes," Asha confirmed. His name came up more than once, always indirectly, never on paper. Patrick felt the old anger stir hot and sharp. I want you to start quietly, he said. Hospitals, clinics, anyone who might remember Elise. Start with public ones. People forget rich women don't go there, but women who are hiding do. I'm already on it, Asha said. There's one more thing. Patrick waited. The necklace, Asha said. Do you remember why Elise insisted on keeping it on her at all times? Patrick frowned. She said it made her feel anchored. She told me it was a promise, Asha continued, that if anything happened to her, the necklace would lead someone back to the truth. Patrick's breath hitched. After the call ended, Patrick sat in the dark staring at the city lights. The necklace had not just survived Elise's disappearance. It had traveled. It had waited. And now, it had found him. The next morning, Patrick went to see Quito. He did not go with cameras or announcements. He went with Asha, and one security car parked far enough away to avoid drawing attention. They found Quito near the same market, sitting on an overturned crate, while the younger children slept nearby, curled against one another like kittens. Quito stood when he saw Patrick, wariness snapping back into place. You came back, he said, half accusation, half surprise. I said I would, Patrick replied. Quito studied him, then nodded once. Most don't. Patrick crouched again, keeping his distance. I want to understand what happened to your mother, he said, but only if you want to tell me. Quito looked away, eyes tracking a bird hopping near a puddle. People ask questions, he said slowly. Then they disappear, or they make things worse. I won't force you, Patrick said. But I need you to know something. He paused, choosing truth over caution. I loved Elise, and I failed her. If there's even a chance that you're her son, then I failed you too. Quito's jaw tightened. Love doesn't stop people from leaving, he said. No, Patrick agreed quietly. But it should make them come back. Quito was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. She told me to remember names, he said. Places, faces, in case she didn't return. Patrick leaned in, heart pounding. Do you remember? Quito nodded. I remember a hospital, he said. Not a big one. Old paint, a woman who helped us, and a man who came at night and scared her. Patrick felt the ground shift beneath him. Do you know the hospital's name? He asked. Quito shook his head. But I remember the smell, he said, and the nurse's eyes. She cried when Mama left. Patrick exchanged a look with Asha. A nurse who cried. An old hospital. A frightened woman. The picture sharpened. Would you recognize her? Asha asked softly. Quito hesitated, then nodded. If I saw her, he said, yes. Patrick straightened, resolve settling into his bones. This was no longer a question of coincidence or charity. This was a buried crime and a child who carried its evidence around his neck. I'm going to find her, Patrick said. The nurse, the hospital, the truth. Quito studied him with an intensity far beyond his years. And if you find the man who scared her? He asked. Patrick's voice was steady. Then he answers, he said, to the law and to me. The city moved around them, unaware that a story it had tried to erase was beginning to surface. Somewhere power shifted. Somewhere an old enemy would soon realize that silence was breaking. And this time it would not be quiet. By the third day, Patrick Tshisekedi understood something he had avoided his entire adult life. The city had two realities, and he had only ever lived in one of them. He began waking before dawn, not to review contracts or join early calls with investors, but to sit quietly in the back seat of an unmarked car, while Asha Mwangi mapped the invisible geography of survival. They drove through narrow streets where the asphalt cracked into dirt, where the smell of smoke clung to walls, where children learned to read faces before letters. Patrick watched from behind tinted glass, shame pooling in his chest, as he realized how close these places were to his offices, and how far they might as well have been another country. Quito met them near the market each morning, never alone. The younger children followed him like shadows. He moved with a vigilance that never slept, scanning corners, memorizing exits. Patrick noticed the way Quito positioned himself between strangers and the smallest ones, how his body instinctively curved protectively. It was not bravado. It was training born of necessity. This one, Asha said quietly as they watched from a distance, is not surviving by luck. Patrick nodded. He's surviving by leadership. Quito's world revealed itself in fragments. There was the woman who sold boiled eggs and slipped him extras when no one was watching. The mechanic who chased the children away when police came only to leave food by the curb an hour later. And then there were the men who watched too closely, who counted heads, who whispered into phones. Patrick began to recognize them. "They're not random," he said one morning, his voice low. "No," Asha replied. "They belong to an organization that calls itself a children's charity." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Names on paper," many, Asha said. "On the street, one." She told him what her quiet inquiries had uncovered: a network that collected homeless children under the promise of food and shelter, then rented them out for labor, begging routes, and worse. The organization's leader was known simply as Father Gideon, a man with a gentle voice and clean shirts who preached compassion by day and enforced obedience by night. "Quito has refused him," Asha said, more than once. Patrick felt a coldness settle in his stomach. "And the necklace," Asha nodded. "That's why the pressure is increasing. Someone recognized it. Gold like that isn't common here. It attracts attention." That afternoon, Patrick insisted on walking the market himself. Not as a CEO, not with a convoy. He wore a simple shirt and left his watch behind. Security hovered at a distance he hated but accepted. The city did not recognize him without the armor of status. That anonymity unsettled him, more than exposure ever had. Quito watched him approach, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here," the boy said bluntly. Patrick stopped a few steps away. "You told me not to lie," he said, "so I won't. I need to see this place the way you do." Quito snorted. "You'll leave." Patrick held his gaze. "Not today." Quito studied him, weighing risk like a seasoned gambler. Finally, he shrugged. "Then don't get in the way." Patrick followed as Quito navigated the market. He saw how quickly kindness turned conditional. He saw a vendor's smile fade when money ran out. He saw how hunger compressed time, how days became transactions. He saw children working for pennies while adults pretended not to notice. At a corner shaded by torn canvas, a man stepped forward. He was tall, clean, his beard trimmed carefully. He wore a faded clerical collar that looked intentionally worn. "Quito," the man said warmly. "We've been looking for you." Quito stiffened. Patrick felt it before he understood it. "Go," Quito muttered to the younger children. They hesitated, then scurried away, fear sharp in their movements. The man smiled wider. "You see," he said, spreading his hands, "you're always protecting. That's why we want you with us. We can help you help them." Patrick stepped closer, instinct screaming, "Who are you?" The man turned, surprise flickering before it smoothed into practiced calm. "A servant," he said. "Father Gideon. We run a shelter, food, beds, safety." Quito laughed short and bitter. "Liar." Father Gideon's eyes flicked to the necklace, lingering a fraction too long. Patrick saw it. "Careful, boy," Father Gideon said softly. "You don't want to miss your chance." Patrick felt his pulse quicken. What chance, he asked. Father Gideon's gaze shifted to Patrick, assessing. "Some chances come once," he said, "and some people make them disappear." The words were polite. The threat beneath them was not. Patrick stepped fully into the space between Father Gideon and Quito. "You should leave," he said. Father Gideon raised an eyebrow. "And who are you?" Patrick held his stare. "Someone who is watching now." For a heartbeat, Father Gideon looked amused. Then his smile thinned. "Watching can be dangerous," he said lightly, "especially when you don't know who else is watching." He stepped back, retreating into the crowd with unsettling ease. Patrick exhaled slowly. Quito's voice shook with controlled rage. "He'll come back," he said. "He always does." Patrick turned to him. "Not alone," he said. "Not anymore." That night the rumors started. By morning, Patrick's name was everywhere on radio shows, on social feeds, whispered at tea stalls. CEO spotted with street children. Publicity stunt, midlife guilt, election move. Patrick read the headlines in silence. His board called an emergency meeting. Investors asked questions disguised as concern. "Is everything all right?" they said. "You seem distracted." Patrick closed his laptop and looked out the window. "No," he said simply. "Everything is not all right." Asha brought him worse news by afternoon. "Father Gideon has filed a report," she said. "Claims Quito assaulted one of his volunteers. Says the boy is dangerous." Patrick felt heat rise in his chest. "Lies." "Yes," Asha agreed, "but lies that move systems." That evening, Patrick arrived at the market to find it tense and half empty. Quito wasn't there. Panic clawed up Patrick's spine. He scanned faces, asked questions. People shrugged. Some looked away. A woman who sold roasted corn leaned close. "They came earlier," she whispered. "Men in a van. They said they were taking him somewhere safe." Patrick's breath hitched. Which way she pointed, Patrick ran. The van was already gone, but the younger children remained huddled and shaking. The girl with the grown-out braids clutched Patrick's sleeve, eyes wet. "They took him," she cried. "They said he belonged to them now." Patrick's hands curled into fists. "No," he said. "He belongs to himself." He pulled out his phone and called Asha. "They've taken him," I know, she said, breathless. "I'm tracking it." Hours stretched. Night fell. Patrick sat on the curb with the children, his suit-forgotten dust settling into its fabric. He fed them, listened to their small voices, tremble as they asked questions he could not answer. "Will he come back?" one asked. Patrick swallowed hard. "Yes," he said, "he will." But inside, fear gnawed. He knew now what he was up against. Not just a corrupt charity, but a system that fed on invisibility. And worse, someone higher up was protecting it. Near midnight, Asha called. "We found the van," she said. "An old warehouse near the river. But Patrick, this isn't just Gideon." Patrick closed his eyes. Who? Asha hesitated. "One of the shell companies tied to the building links back to Kofi Bemba." Patrick felt the world tilt. Of course. Kofi's shadow stretched long. Elise, the disappearance, the threats. The pattern sharpened into something undeniable. Patrick stood resolve, burning through exhaustion. "I'm coming," Patrick, Asha warned. "This could explode. It already has," he said. "I won't leave that boy alone in the dark." As the car sped through empty streets, Patrick touched his chest where the memory of the necklace pressed like a brand. Elise had said it would lead someone back to the truth. It had. And now the truth was screaming. The warehouse by the river looked abandoned. From a distance, its corrugated walls rusted into the color of old blood windows, boarded unevenly like broken teeth. Patrick Tshisekedi arrived just before dawn, the sky a dull gray that promised neither rain nor relief. He stayed in the car, hands clenched on his knees, while Asha Mwangi spoke quietly into her phone, coordinating with contacts she trusted more than uniforms. "This isn't a rescue operation," she said when she hung up, meeting Patrick's eyes. "Not officially. If we go in loud, they'll scatter the children. If we go in blind, we risk Quito." Patrick nodded. He understood the math. He hated it. They waited until a delivery truck rolled in bread crates stacked high, a man yawning as he signed papers. The door slid open. Asha moved first, calm and decisive, slipping inside with two men she had vetted herself. Patrick followed, heart pounding the air inside, heavy with damp and fear. The smell hit him, before the sight unwashed bodies, stale food disinfectant used to mask rot. In the half-light he saw children on thin mats, some sleeping, some staring at the ceiling with eyes too old. A boy coughed deep and wet. A girl flinched when a shadow passed. Patrick's chest tightened. He forced himself to breathe. "Quiet," Asha whispered. "We don't know where he is yet." They moved through the space in sections, counting heads, memorizing faces. Patrick scanned each child, dread rising with everyone that wasn't Quito. Then near a partition at the back he heard a familiar voice, low, controlled, steadying someone else. "Don't cry," Quito was saying. "We'll get out." Patrick's knees nearly buckled. Quito sat on the floor beside a smaller boy, arm draped protectively over his shoulders. His lip was split. A bruise bloomed along his cheekbone. But his eyes, those sharp, watchful eyes, lifted the instant Patrick stepped into view. For a heartbeat, disbelief froze them both. Then Quito stood. "You came," he said, voice rough. Patrick crossed the distance in 3 strides and knelt, hands hovering as if unsure where to land. "I said I would," he replied, and this time the words did not tremble. Footsteps echoed. A man appeared at the doorway, one of Father Gideon's enforcers, shoulders thick, expression bored. He took in the scene, eyes widening as recognition dawned. "This is private property," the man said. "You can't." Asha stepped forward, phone already recording. "You're detaining minors without consent," she said evenly. "And you've made a very public mistake," the man sneered. "You think a camera scares us?" Before Asha could answer, Patrick rose to his full height. "It should," he said quietly. "Because you won't be dealing with children anymore. You'll be dealing with me." The man laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You think money. I know what money does," Patrick interrupted. "I also know what happens when it stops protecting you." Sirens wailed in the distance, closer than the man expected. His confidence faltered. He backed away, cursing, and vanished through a side door. Asha moved quickly. "Now," she said. "All of you. Up!" The children stirred, confusion rippling. Patrick crouched again, meeting Quito's eyes. "We're leaving," he said. "Together." Quito hesitated only a second before nodding. "Don't leave them," he said, gesturing to the others. Patrick didn't argue. He lifted a girl into his arms, her head resting against his shoulder, like she had always belonged there. Asha guided the rest, voices. Soft movements, sure. They emerged into the pale morning as police vehicles pulled up, honest ones, Asha hoped. Children blinked at the open sky as if it were something new. Quito stood beside Patrick, jaw set, refusing to look small. An officer approached, cautious. "Sir," he said to Patrick, recognition dawning. "We received reports." "You'll receive more," Patrick replied. "From my lawyers and from the children." The officer nodded, already overwhelmed. By the time the sun rose fully, the warehouse was sealed, Father Gideon in custody. His smile finally gone. The children were transported to a temporary shelter Asha had prepared, clean, quiet, guarded by people who knew when to step back. Patrick sat with Quito on the steps outside, exhaustion settling into his bones. "You could have stayed away," Quito said after a while. "I could have," Patrick agreed. "I didn't." Quito studied him. Why, Patrick took a long breath. "Because your mother mattered," he said. "And because you matter." Quito looked down at the necklace, fingers tracing the chain. "She said not everyone who says they care actually does." "She was right," Patrick said. "And sometimes the ones who do come too late." Quito's voice softened. "You came." Patrick felt tears threaten. He did not hide them. Later that day, as the children slept, Asha returned with files spread across a small table. "We found the hospital," she said quietly. "An old public one near the river. The nurse's name is Salima." Patrick's heart leapt. "She's alive," yes, Asha said, "and she remembers Elise." They went together in the afternoon. The hospital smelled of bleach and boiled water paint peeling in strips. Mama Salima sat behind a desk worn smooth by years of hands. She looked up, eyes sharp despite her age. When Patrick said Elise's name, the nurse's face crumpled. "She was brave," Mama Salima whispered. "Too brave. They told her to disappear. They told her the child would be safer if no one knew." Patrick swallowed. "Who told her?" Mama Salima hesitated. Then she spoke. "A man who came with men," she said. "They called him Honorable." Patrick closed his eyes. "Kofi Bemba." "She left at night," Mama Salima continued. "She pressed the baby to her chest and cried. She gave me that necklace to hide, but later she took it back. She said it would find the right person if she couldn't." Patrick felt the weight of destiny and design collide. "Did she survive?" he asked. Mama Salima nodded. "For a while," she said. "Then she disappeared again. I never saw her after." Patrick stood in silence, grief and gratitude tangled. Back at the shelter, Quito waited, anxiety etched into his face. Patrick knelt before him. "We found the nurse," Patrick said. "She knew your mother. She tried to help." Quito's eyes filled. "Where is she?" Patrick chose honesty. "I don't know yet," he said. "But we're closer." Quito nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "She told me not to hate," he said, "even when it hurts." Patrick placed a hand over his own heart. "She taught you well." That night, Patrick arranged rooms for the children and stayed nearby, sleeping little. As darkness settled, he realized something had changed, not just in the city but in himself. Power had brought him here. Responsibility would keep him. Outside, the river flowed on, carrying secrets that were finally being pulled to the surface. And somewhere in the city, a man who believed silence was permanent would soon learn how loud the truth could be. The hospital records did not give up their secrets easily. Patrick Tshisekedi learned that truth the hard way, sitting beside Asha Mwangi in a cramped office where files were stacked like defensive walls and a ceiling fan pushed warm air in tired circles. The clerk at the desk smiled politely while her eyes stayed guarded, fingers tapping a pen that had stopped writing years ago. "We don't keep records that far back," she said for the third time. "Not complete ones." Asha nodded, patient. "We're not asking for complete," she replied. "Just enough to confirm a birth, a woman named Elise, a nurse named Salima." The clerk's smile tightened. "Many Elises," she said. Patrick leaned forward. "This one wore a gold necklace," he said softly, "and she left in fear." The clerk's eyes flickered, just a flicker. But Patrick saw it. She glanced toward the open doorway, then back at the files. Fear, not ignorance, sat behind the desk. "Come back another day," she said, already turning away. Outside, the sun pressed down, relentless. Patrick exhaled slowly, the disappointment sharp but expected. He had lived long enough to know how silence was maintained, not by lack of information, but by the cost of sharing it. "She's scared," Patrick said. Asha nodded. "And she's not wrong." They drove in silence to a small cafe across from the hospital, one of those places where time moved at half speed and people pretended not to notice each other. Asha ordered tea. Patrick didn't touch his. "We need witnesses," Patrick said. "Not paper, we have one," Asha replied. "Mama Salima." Patrick's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. "Stop digging. You're putting children at risk." Patrick stared at it, jaw tightening. "He knows," he said quietly. Asha didn't ask who. She already knew. That afternoon, they returned to the shelter to find Quito sitting apart from the others, knees drawn to his chest, the necklace wrapped around his fingers like a lifeline. He looked up when Patrick entered, eyes searching his face. "You went to the hospital," Quito said. It wasn't a question. Patrick sat beside him. "We did," and Quito pressed. Patrick chose his words carefully. "They're afraid," he said, "but one person wasn't. Mama Salima remembers your mother." Quito's shoulders sagged with relief and grief all at once. "She cried," he whispered. "Mama said people who cry still care." Patrick nodded. "She does." Quito looked up, something fierce burning through the softness. "Then why won't they help us?" Patrick took a breath. "Because someone powerful doesn't want them to." Quito's eyes hardened. "The man in the night." "Yes," Patrick said. "That man." That evening, Mama Salima arrived at the shelter with Asha. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, her back bent by years of work and worry. When she saw Quito, she stopped, hand flying to her mouth. "My child," she whispered. Quito approached cautiously, then stopped an arm's length away. Mama Salima reached out, then pulled her hand back, respecting the space he needed. "You look like her," she said through tears. "Your eyes." Quito swallowed hard. "She sang to me," he said, "when she was scared." Mama Salima nodded. "She sang in the ward, too," she said, softly. She said it kept fear from settling. Patrick watched the exchange, heart heavy with the weight of years stolen. "Mama Salima," he said gently, "we need your help." The nurse straightened as much as she could. "I have been waiting for someone to ask," she said. They gathered in a small office, the door closed, the air thick with anticipation. Asha placed a recorder on the table, not hiding it. Transparency mattered now. Mama Salima spoke slowly, each word chosen with care. She described Elise arriving at the hospital late at night, exhausted, frightened, refusing to give details. She described men arriving later, well-dressed, confident, calling each other by titles. She described the threats whispered, where no one could hear. They said the child would be taken if she didn't cooperate. Mama Salima said. They said silence was protection. Patrick's hands clenched. Did she name them? Mama Salima nodded. One name, she said. Coffee Bemba. The room went quiet. He came again after the birth. Mama Salima continued. He asked about the child. He asked if the mother had contacts. When she disappeared the second time, men came and told us to forget her. Quito's breathing quickened. She didn't abandon me, he said, voice breaking. No, Mama Salima said firmly. She fought. Patrick felt something crack inside him. Relief and rage colliding. Thank you, he said hoarsely. The next day the pressure intensified. Patrick's board demanded answers. Sponsors threatened withdrawals. Anonymous accounts flooded social media with stories painting Patrick as a manipulator using children for image repair. The phrase staged compassion trended by afternoon. Patrick read none of it. He sat with Asha drafting a plan that did not rely on public opinion. We need the hospital clerk, Asha said. And the driver, Jean Bosco, Patrick said. He disappeared after Elise left. He didn't, Asha replied. He went quiet. There's a difference. They found Jean Bosco, 2 days later in a rural town hours away, working at a repair shop that smelled of oil and dust. He froze when Patrick stepped inside. Recognition, immediate and unwelcome. I can't help you, Jean Bosco said before Patrick spoke. They warned me. Patrick raised his hands. I won't force you, he said, but a child is in danger because of what you know. Jean Bosco's shoulders sagged. He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes darting to the road. I drove her, he said quietly. The night she left, not by choice. They told me where to go. They told me to forget. Who? Patrick asked. Jean Bosco's voice shook. Men tied to Han. Bemba. Jean Bosco told them about safe houses, about cash passed through envelopes, about a final order to disappear. He told them about a phone call weeks later that ended with a threat to his family. I'm tired of hiding, he said, but I won't die for this. You won't. Patrick said. "I promise." Back at the shelter, Quito waited, eyes sharp with expectation. Patrick knelt in front of him and spoke plainly. "We have people who can prove what happened," Patrick said. "But the system will try to stop us." Quito nodded. "It always does." "There's something else," Patrick said. "To move forward, you'll need to tell your story." Quito's jaw tightened. "In front of people?" "Yes," Patrick said. "In front of people who will try not to listen." Quito looked down at the necklace, thumb tracing the clasp. "Mama said truth is heavy," he whispered, "but lies crush." Patrick placed a hand on Quito's shoulder. "You won't be alone." Outside, a car idled too long across the street. A man pretended to check his phone while watching the shelter door. Asha noticed. "They're watching," she said. Patrick nodded. "Let them." Because for the first time in years, the story was no longer buried. It was gathering witnesses, quiet ones, frightened ones, but witnesses nonetheless. And Patrick understood something essential: power feared daylight. As night fell, Patrick sat by the window, phone in hand. Another message buzzed, in this one more direct: "Walk away, or the boy pays." Patrick typed a reply and erased it twice before sending a single sentence: "I'm not walking away." He turned off the phone and sat with the weight of what he had chosen. Somewhere, Coffee Bemba would feel the shift. Somewhere, the ground beneath old lies would begin to crack. And when it did, Patrick intended to be standing there with a child at his side and the truth in his hands. The city decided Patrick Tshisekedi's guilt long before it decided the facts. By morning, the shelter's address had leaked. Not the exact building, Asha had been careful, but the neighborhood. Cars slowed as they passed. People pretended to scroll while filming. A radio host with a velvet voice laughed on air about billionaire tears, asking listeners whether compassion could be audited like a balance sheet. Patrick stood at the window and watched the street. Like a man studying a tide he could not command. He had known scrutiny. He had survived scandals that rose and fell on rumor. This was different. This was a child's life turned into spectacle. Asha joined him, coffee untouched in her hand. "The narrative is moving fast," she said. "They're framing you as a man buying redemption." Patrick exhaled. "And Quito, they're calling him coached," Asha replied. "Or worse, an actor." Patrick closed his eyes. He had expected resistance from Coffee Bemba's networks, but the speed still shocked him. Influence traveled faster than truth, especially when it wore familiar clothes. Inside, the children sensed the tension. They stayed quieter than usual, eyes darting toward doors and windows. Quito sat with them, his posture a shield, his voice low as he explained. "Rules: don't answer questions, don't leave alone, don't talk to strangers even if they smile." Patrick watched him from the hallway. Leadership, he thought, didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just held the line. Midday brought the summons. Asha's phone buzzed with a message stamped with official seals and soft threats: an urgent review by the Child Welfare Council. Attendance required. Patrick read it twice, then nodded. "They'll try to take him," Quito said flatly when Patrick told him. Patrick crouched, meeting the boy's eyes. "They'll try to intimidate us," he corrected, "and they'll ask questions meant to confuse. You can answer or not answer. You can sit quietly. Whatever you choose, I'll be there." Quito studied him. "You won't talk over me," Patrick said. "I'll listen." The council chamber was all polished wood and filtered light, a room designed to soothe while it cornered. Officials sat in a semicircle, expressions carefully neutral. A man with silver hair smiled without warmth. "Mr. Tshisekedi," he said, extending a hand. "We're concerned about the welfare of the minors in your care." Patrick shook his hand, eyes steady. "So am I." Questions came quickly, overlapping like nets. Why had Patrick intervened personally? Why had he bypassed recognized charities? Why was a traumatized child being paraded in public? Keto sat between Patrick and Asha's feet, dangling fingers twisted in the necklace chain. Patrick felt the urge to answer everything, to overwhelm them with context and proof. He resisted. This was not his story to dominate. Keto, the silver-haired man, said, turning with a practiced softness. "Do you feel safe with Mr. Tshisekedi?" The room held its breath. Keto looked at Patrick once, then back at the council. "Safer than before," he said. A murmur ran through the seats, and before another official pressed, Keto's shoulders squared. "Before people took me," he said. "They told me it was for my own good." "Who?" the silver-haired man asked. Keto shook his head. "You already know the names," he said quietly. Asha inhaled. Patrick felt a strange pride, fear braided with it, but pride nonetheless. The silver-haired man leaned back. "We'll be assigning temporary custody to a licensed organization," he said smoothly, "until matters are clarified." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Which organization?" The man slid a folder across the table. The logo on the cover was crisp and benevolent. Patrick felt a cold clarity settle. "That organization has been implicated in unlawful detention," he said, "and in intimidation of witnesses. Allegations," the man replied, "unproven." Patrick met his gaze. "So were Elise's disappearance and the threats that followed," he said. "Until they weren't." Silence. Asha stood. "We are formally objecting," she said, "and filing for an emergency injunction." The silver-haired man smiled again. "Of course," he said, "you may." Outside cameras waited. Questions flew like stones. Patrick said nothing. He opened the car door for Keto, first a small gesture that the crowd twisted into symbolism within minutes. By evening, the injunction bought them time, but not peace. Asha's contacts reported increased pressure. Hospital clerks called in sick. A witness backed out citing family illness. Jean Bosco's workshop was vandalized. A note taped to the door read, "Silence is safety." Patrick visited Jean Bosco that night, standing amid broken glass and the smell of oil. "I can move you," Patrick said. "Your family, too." Jean Bosco shook his head, tired eyes steady. "I won't run again," he said. "But if something happens, it won't," Patrick said, and meant it with a conviction he had never felt in negotiations. Back at the shelter, Keto paced. "They want to put us back in boxes," he said. "Nice ones, clean ones, still boxes." Patrick sat with him. "What do you want?" he asked. Keto stopped pacing. "I want them to hear her," he said. "My mother." Patrick swallowed. "We can make that happen," he said, "but it will be loud." Keto nodded. "Loud is okay." The next morning, Asha brought news that sharpened everything. "We found the footage," she said, "from the hospital, a corridor camera, the night Elise left." Patrick's breath caught. "Is it clear?" "Clear enough," Asha replied. "Faces, a title, a man who thought no one would ever look." Patrick closed his eyes, grief and resolve colliding. "We go public," he said. Asha hesitated. "They'll come for you harder." Patrick looked at Keto, who stood listening, jaw set. "They already are." They chose the venue carefully. Not a press conference in a hotel ballroom, but a community hall near the river. Open doors, daylight, witnesses who mattered. The hall filled quickly. Journalists, market women, clinic workers, students, skeptics. Patrick stood at the podium and did something he had rarely done in public. He waited. When the room settled, he spoke plainly. "I am not here to defend my image," he said. "I am here to tell the truth." He introduced Mama Salima. He played the footage. Gasps rippled as faces appeared on the screen. Men in suits, confidence unguarded. A title spoken aloud. A threat whispered. Keto stood beside Patrick's, small hand clenched around the necklace. When it was his turn, he spoke without notes. "My mother told me to remember," he said. "So I did. She didn't leave me. She was pushed." The room shifted. Some people cried, others looked away. Phones recorded, but the tone had changed. This was not spectacle. This was testimony. Outside, police sirens rose not toward them but elsewhere. Asha's phone buzzed with messages, her eyes widening. "They've issued warrants," she whispered, "for the charity leaders. And subpoenas." Patrick felt a tremor run through him. This was the line, crossed and irreversible. That night, as they returned to the shelter, a car followed too closely. At a light, it pulled alongside. The window lowered just enough for a voice to slip through. "You've chosen a hard road," the voice said. "Children get hurt on hard roads." Patrick did not turn. He waited until the light changed, then drove on. At the shelter, he checked locks, counted heads, sat with the children until sleep came in fits and starts. Quito lingered last, standing by the window. "Are you scared?" Patrick asked. Quito nodded. "Yes." Patrick nodded back. "Me too." Quito looked at him, something like relief softening his face. "Then we're doing it right," he said. Patrick watched the city settle into uneasy night. He understood now that truth did not arrive as a clean solution. It arrived as pressure on systems, on people, on the bones of those who carried it. And as the river whispered outside, Patrick knew the next move would be brutal. The men who thrived in shadows would not yield quietly. But the shadows had been named, and once named, they could be chased. The kidnapping happened in daylight. Not the cinematic kind with screeching tires and masked men, but the quieter, more efficient version that relied on permission slips and uniforms. It began with a knock at the shelter gate, just after noon, when the heat pressed everyone indoors and the children were drowsy from lunch. Asha was in a meeting across town. Patrick was in the back room with 2 social workers, reviewing temporary custody filings. Quito sat at the long table with the younger kids, teaching them a game he had learned on the street, counting steps to safety, naming exits, turning fear into numbers. The knock came again, firmer this time. Patrick glanced at the security monitor. 2 vehicles idled outside, white and clean, bearing the insignia of the Child Welfare Council. 3 men and a woman stood at the gate, clipboards in hand, faces practiced into calm. Patrick's stomach tightened. He stood. "Don't open it yet," he told the guard and walked to the door himself. "Yes," Patrick said through the intercom. "Routine transfer," the woman said, smiling. "We're here for the boy, Quito." Patrick felt the words hit like a blow, under whose order she lifted a document toward the camera. "Emergency placement. It's all legal." Patrick read the seal, the signatures real enough to move fast, false enough to crumble later. He had seen this tactic before in other contexts. Paper moved faster than truth. Quito appeared at his elbow, eyes sharp. "They're lying," he said quietly. Patrick nodded. "I know." He opened the gate, but did not step aside. "You won't take him," he said evenly. The man behind the woman sighed as if disappointed. "Mr. Tshisekedi," he said, voice smooth. "Please don't make this harder." Behind Patrick, the shelter stirred. The younger children sensed the shift, fear rippling like a current. Patrick turned to Quito. "Go inside," he said softly. "With the others." Quito shook his head. "If I go, they'll come anyway." Patrick met his gaze. "Stay where I can see you," he said. The woman's smile thinned. "We can involve the police," she said. Patrick held her stare. "So can I." For a moment, it looked like it might stall there, 2 versions of authority locked in place. Then a siren wailed somewhere down the street, closer than it should have been. A police car rolled into view and stopped behind the council vehicles. The woman exhaled, relief flickering. "Perfect," she said. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting on belts. They approached with the careful neutrality of men taught to defer to paperwork. "Problem here?" one asked. Patrick handed over the injunction papers Asha had prepared. The officer skimmed them, brow furrowing. The woman interrupted. "Those are being reviewed," she said quickly. "Our order supersedes." The officer hesitated. He looked between the documents, the council insignia, Patrick's face. The calculation was visible and frightening. In that instant, a second car pulled up behind the police. Unmarked, the engine idled. The driver did not get out. Quito felt it before Patrick did. He stepped back, hand flying, to the necklace. "Run," Patrick whispered. But Quito didn't. He turned not toward the shelter, but toward the gate, toward Patrick. His voice rose clear and ringing. "You can't take me," he said. "I don't consent." The woman's smile vanished. "He's confused," she said sharply. "He's traumatized." A man stepped forward, one Patrick recognized from the warehouse. He moved fast. Everything fractured at once. The man grabbed Quito's arm. Quito twisted, shouting. Patrick lunged, catching Quito's other arm. The police shouted. The woman barked orders. The unmarked car door flew open. Patrick felt a blow to his ribs and staggered, pain flaring. He tightened his grip, pulling Quito back. For a heartbeat, the boy's weight was anchored against him, small, fierce, refusing. Then, another blow landed harder, knocking Patrick to the ground. The world tilted. He tasted blood. Quito, Patrick shouted. Hands tore Quito free. The boy screamed not with fear but fury. He kicked, bit, fought like a cornered animal. The necklace snapped free, the chain breaking with a sharp sound as it flew and skidded across the pavement. Patrick saw it and felt something in his chest tear. The unmarked car surged forward. A door slammed. Tires spun, and then they were gone. Silence crashed down like debris. The police stood frozen, shocked by how fast authority had turned criminal. The councilwoman stared at the empty street, face pale. Patrick pushed himself up, lungs burning. He ignored the pain and ran to where the necklace lay. He picked it up with shaking hands, the broken clasp cold against his palm. Asha's voice rang in his ears from 1,000 warnings, paper moves faster than truth. Patrick turned on the officer's rage, finally breaking free. "You saw that," he said. "You all saw that." One officer swallowed. "Sir, You will file the report," Patrick said. "Now, as a kidnapping, and you will name every person who stood here." The woman backed away. "This is a misunderstanding," she began. Patrick's voice dropped to something dangerous. "If you leave," he said, "you become part of it." She froze. Minutes later, the street filled with sirens, real ones this time. Asha arrived, breathless eyes going straight to Patrick's bloodied shirt, then to the empty space where Quito had stood. "No," she said. Patrick closed his fingers around the necklace. "They took him." Asha swore softly. She pulled out her phone, already moving. "We'll track the car," she said. "Traffic cams, toll points. This will be louder than they want." Patrick nodded, mind racing. He looked at the children, now crying openly, calling Quito's name. He knelt, forcing his voice steady. "I will bring him back," he said. "I promise." Night fell heavy and unforgiving. The ransom came at midnight, delivered through a burner phone. A single message. "Walk away. Withdraw the filings. The boy returns." Patrick stared at the words until they blurred. He imagined Elise in a hospital bed, men telling her the same thing with different words. "Silence is safety." Asha watched his face. "We don't negotiate," she said. Patrick closed his eyes. "They know that," he replied. "That's why they took him. They worked through the night." Asha coordinated with journalists who had been at the hall, with clinic workers, who knew back alleys, with a retired investigator who owed her a favor. Patrick called every contact who had ever benefited from his restraint and asked them to choose. By dawn, the city hummed with rumors. The kidnapping could not be contained. Too many had seen it. Too many phones had been raised. At a warehouse on the city's edge, another one newer, cleaner Quito sat on a concrete floor, wrists aching from plastic ties. He breathed through fear the way his mother had taught him, slow-counted, stubborn. "You could have made this easy," a man said from the shadows. "Just say you lied." Quito lifted his chin. "I don't lie," he said. The man laughed. "Everyone does." Quito's eyes flicked to the broken place on his necklace where the chain had snapped. "Not about her," he said. Back in the city, Patrick stood before cameras he had not invited. He did not perform. He did not soften his words. "My son has been kidnapped," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "This is what power looks like when it is threatened. I will not withdraw. I will not be silent." The word "son" rippled through the crowd. Asha met Patrick's eyes, surprised but understanding. The message traveled faster than the ransom demand. Within hours, warrants expanded. The council suspended its officials. The charity froze its accounts. But the car was still unaccounted for. Quito was still gone. Patrick sat alone for a moment, the necklace in his hands, Elise's promise heavy against his palm. He pressed the broken clasp closed with his fingers until it cut his skin. "I'm coming," he whispered into the empty room. "Hold on." Somewhere, the men who believed daylight was optional felt the ground shift beneath them. And somewhere in the dark, a boy counted breaths and waited, knowing for the first time that someone powerful was counting with him. The rescue did not come with sirens. Patrick Tshisekedi learned that sometimes the loudest battles were won in whispers in the spaces where power assumed it was invisible. Dawn bled into the city with a thin gray light as Asha Mwangi spread maps across a table littered with empty cups and half-charged phones. Lines crisscrossed neighborhoods. Names were circled, erased, circled again. They moved him twice. Asha said, finger tracing a route along the river. The first warehouse was a decoy. The second is cleaner, controlled. Whoever is holding him expects us to make noise and fail. Patrick stared at the map without blinking. He had not slept. The pain in his ribs had settled into a dull throb, a reminder he welcomed. It kept him present, where he asked. Asha tapped a square near an industrial park that pretended to be logistics and was in truth storage for secrets. Here she said, "Security is light but disciplined. No uniforms, no badges." Patrick nodded. "They're expecting money." "They're expecting silence," Asha corrected. "Let's give them confusion." They moved at mid-morning when shift changes made people careless. Patrick insisted on going himself. Asha argued once hard, and then stopped. She knew that pulling him back now would cost more than letting him go forward. They approached on foot from different angles, blending with delivery workers and cleaners. Patrick wore a cap, pulled low, his posture unremarkable. He counted steps, exits, cameras, skills learned. Not in childhood, but in boardrooms, where attention was currency. Inside the building smelled of new paint and old fear. A corridor led to a side room where voices murmured. Patrick recognized one voice immediately, even through the wall, steady, low, refusing to break. "Quito." Patrick's pulse surged. He signaled Asha, who nodded and slipped down the corridor to cut the power to the cameras. The lights flickered, then steadied on emergency glow. Confusion rippled. Patrick moved. The door gave way under his shoulder, with a crack that echoed. Inside, two men turned, startled. Quito sat on a chair, wrists bound, face bruised, but eyes bright with defiance. He saw Patrick and sucked in a breath. "Uncle," he said, quiet, stunned. The word anchored Patrick to the moment. He crossed the room, ignoring the men lunging toward him. One grabbed his arm. Patrick twisted, pain flaring, and drove an elbow back. The other swung. Patrick ducked too late. A blow glanced off his temple, stars bursting. He did not go down. He reached Quito, cut the ties with a blade Asha had pressed into his palm, earlier hands shaking now that he was close. Quito stood on unsteady legs, anger and relief warring on his face. "Stay behind me," Patrick said. The men recovered, circling. One laughed, breath sour. "You think you can just take him?" Patrick straightened, blood trickling down his cheek. "I know I can," he said. Asha burst through the door with two others, men who had chosen a side and meant it. The room erupted into motion. Shouts, scuffling, a chair skidded. Someone went down hard. Patrick shielded Quito with his body, taking a blow meant for the boy. Pain exploded across his ribs. He grunted, but did not yield. The men hesitated. This was not how it was supposed to go. They had expected leverage, not resistance that bled. Sirens rose outside, delayed but real. The men scattered curses, trailing them like smoke. Patrick sank to one knee, breath ragged. Quito knelt with him, hands hovering, eyes wide. "You're hurt," he said. Patrick forced a smile. "I've been worse," he lied. Asha pressed in, checking both of them. "We need to move," she said. "Now." They left through a loading bay into daylight that felt unreal after the dim. Quito squinted, then laughed once, a sound sharp and disbelieving. Patrick helped him into the back of a van, then climbed in beside him as the doors slammed shut. The city rushed past in fragments. Patrick's vision swam. Asha's voice cut through it, calm and commanding. "Stay with me," she said to Patrick. "I am," he replied, though darkness tugged at the edges. At the hospital, white lights swallowed them. Patrick drifted in and out, aware of hands, of voices, of Quito's presence near his bed. He felt pressure, heard numbers, smelled antiseptic. When he came fully back, it was to the sound of soft reading. Quito sat in a chair pulled close, a thin book open on his knees. He looked up, startled, then smiled, a small, careful thing. "You're awake," Quito said. Patrick blinked. His head throbbed. "You're reading," he observed. Quito shrugged. "Mama liked stories," he said. "She said words make rooms bigger." Patrick swallowed. She was right. A nurse approached, gentle. "He has a cracked rib and a concussion," she told Quito. "He'll be sore, but he'll heal." Quito nodded solemnly. "He's stubborn," he said. "He'll be fine." Patrick chuckled, then winced. "That's what she used to say about me," he murmured. Quito's eyes flicked to the bedside table where the broken necklace lay. He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. "It broke," he said quietly. Patrick reached out, touching the chain. "We'll fix it," he said. "Together." Quito hesitated, then held it out. "You keep it," he said, "for now." Patrick met his gaze. "Are you sure?" Quito nodded. "It found you," he said simply. "That means something." Later that day, as Patrick slept again, Asha stood in the hallway with her phone pressed to her ear, voice low and fierce. Warrants multiplied, accounts froze, names that had never appeared together now did, connected by lines no one could erase. The footage from the rescue, leaked not by accident. A shaky clip of Patrick bleeding, shielding a child, spread like wildfire. The narrative shifted not to sainthood, but to something harder to dismiss: action. When Patrick woke the second time, the room was fuller. Mama Salima stood at the foot of the bed, hands clasped, eyes wet. She smiled through tears when she saw him awake. "You kept your promise," she said. Patrick nodded. "We're not done," he replied. Quito leaned against the bed rail, exhaustion finally claiming him. Patrick placed a careful hand over the boy's, feeling the small warmth there. "I won't let them take you again," Patrick said. Quito looked at him, searching. "People promise," he said. Patrick held his gaze. "Then watch what I do," he said. Outside, the city exhaled. The men who had relied on paper and silence found both turning against them, and in a hospital room washed in afternoon light, a boy who had learned to count fear in breaths, learned something else, that sometimes when the truth was heavy, Someone strong enough would lift it with you. The truth did not arrive all at once. It arrived in layers, peeling back years of silence with the patience of something that had waited long enough. Patrick Tshisekedi spent 2 days in the hospital, under observation, his body forced into stillness, while his mind refused to rest. Each hour brought visitors, lawyers, investigators, officials suddenly eager to be seen. But Patrick asked for only 3 people at a time: Asha Mwangi, Mama Salima, and Kito. They sat together in the late afternoons when the ward quieted, sunlight slanting across the floor. Patrick listened more than he spoke. He had learned finally that truth did not need embellishment, only space. Mama Salima began where memory hurt the most. Elise came to us at night, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She was afraid, but she would not show it. She asked for privacy. She asked for safety for the child. Patrick closed his eyes, Elise's voice rising in his mind. Calm, precise, stubbornly, hopeful. She told me, Mama Salima continued, that men had warned her, that if she stayed visible, the child would be used against her. They offered protection in exchange for silence. Kito leaned forward. She said the same to me, he whispered. That being unseen was the only way. Patrick felt the familiar ache of regret tighten in his chest. Why didn't she come to me? He asked quietly. Mama Salima met his gaze. Because the men who threatened her knew you, she said, and they knew how to make you hesitate. The words cut deeper than any blow. Asha placed a folder on the bed, thick with documents. We've connected the shell companies, she said. Payments, property transfers, safe houses, they all lead back to Coffee Bemba. Patrick nodded once. He had expected as much. And Elise Asha's voice softened. She was moved twice after the birth. Each move arranged by intermediaries tied to Bemba. The last location went dark 3 years ago. Kito's breathing quickened. Patrick reached for his hand, grounding him. That doesn't mean she's gone, Patrick said. It means someone wanted us to think she was. Mama Salima's eyes shone. Elise was careful, she said. She left markers, the necklace, the nurse, the driver. She believed the truth would gather its own witnesses. That night, Patrick asked for the lights to be dimmed. He stared at the ceiling, Elise's face floating in the quiet. He saw the moments he had misread, her distance, her warnings, her insistence on contingency. He had thought love would protect them. He had not understood how power invited predators. The next morning brought a breakthrough. Jean Bosco arrived at the hospital under police escort. Face pale but resolute, he asked to see Patrick alone. When the door closed, Jean Bosco's shoulders slumped. They moved her again, he said. I found someone who saw her 2 years ago. A clinic near the border. She was weak but alive. Patrick's heart leapt, where Jean Bosco shook his head. They don't know exactly. But she asked about her son. She asked if anyone had seen the necklace. Kito's breath hitched. She was looking for me, he whispered. Patrick nodded, emotion tightening his throat. We'll keep looking, he said. Now with daylight. As if summoned by the word daylight brought consequences. Prosecutors announced formal charges against the charity leaders and several council officials. Accounts froze, travel bans issued. And then the headline Patrick had both feared and needed appeared across screens: Han Coffee. Bemba named in child exploitation and coercion case. Coffee responded within hours, calling a press conference of his own. Patrick watched from his hospital bed as the man he had once trusted stood before microphones, posture relaxed, voice smooth. These are lies, Coffee said. A desperate attempt by a powerful man to rewrite a failed marriage and distract from his own misconduct. Patrick turned off the screen. They'll try to turn it on you, Asha said. They already have, Patrick replied. It doesn't change what's true. By afternoon, Patrick was discharged under strict instructions. He returned not to his apartment but to a secure house prepared by Asha-neutral ground guarded quietly. Quito came with him clutching a small bag the nurses had packed. That evening they sat together on the steps outside the city, humming at a distance. Quito broke the silence. "You called me your son," he said. Patrick didn't flinch. "I meant it." Quito studied his hands. What if she comes back and doesn't want that Patrick considered this? "Then we listen," he said, "and we do what's right for you, not for me." Quito nodded slowly. Trust, he was learning, was not demanded. It was practiced. The next days unfolded with brutal clarity. Witnesses came forward, market vendors, clinic staff, drivers. Patterns emerged. Payments matched threats. Threats matched disappearances. The case grew teeth. Patrick testified before a closed committee, voice steady as he admitted his failures. "I ignored warnings," he said. "I believed my power insulated me. It didn't. It endangered those I loved." His honesty did not absolve him, but it shifted the ground. People leaned in when he spoke, not because he was powerful, but because he was accountable. The darkest blow came at night. Asha woke Patrick with a call. "They've found remains," she said quietly. "Not Elise, another woman, same network, same methods." Patrick sat in the dark, the weight of it crushing. "How many?" he asked. "Too many," Asha replied. Quito stood in the doorway, having heard enough. Patrick opened his arms. Quito stepped into them without hesitation the first time he had done so. "She told me not to hate." Quito said into Patrick's chest, "But it's hard." Patrick held him, voice low. "We don't have to hate," he said. "We have to stop it." By the end of the week, the case had grown beyond one child, one marriage, one necklace. It became a reckoning. Raids expanded, arrests followed, and still, Elise remained just out of reach, alive in possibility, absent in fact. On the seventh night, a call came from across the border. A woman's voice, thin but certain. "I'm looking for my son," she said. "He wears a gold necklace." Patrick closed his eyes, heart hammering. "He's safe," he said, "and he's waiting." The line crackled. "Then so am I," the woman replied. Patrick looked at Quito, who watched his face with wide, searching eyes. Patrick nodded, tears finally spilling. "We found her," he said. The city did not celebrate. It held its breath. Because when truths this deep surfaced, they demanded a final accounting. And that accounting was coming. The moment hope arrived, resistance hardened. Patrick Tshisekedi learned quickly that systems did not surrender just because the truth knocked politely. They stalled. They delayed. They wrapped injustice in procedure and called it balance. The call from across the border had electrified the team. Elise, alive. Weak, but alive. The confirmation was thin, wrapped in fear and distance, but it was real enough to move hearts and dangerous enough to provoke retaliation. Within hours, the legal pressure intensified. Asha Mwangi returned from an emergency meeting with her jaw set. "They're filing motions to suppress witness testimony," she said, citing contamination, coercion, media influence. Patrick sat at the dining table of the safe house, documents spread before him like a battlefield. "They're afraid," he said. "Yes," Asha replied, "and they're powerful." The next blow came disguised as protection. A court order arrived by courier, stamped and sealed, instructing that Quito be placed under state custody for his own safety until proceedings concluded. The language was soft. The intent was not. Quito stood in the doorway, listening, shoulders tight. "They're trying again," he said. Patrick nodded. "They are." Asha rubbed her temples. "If they take him now, they isolate him. Control access. Control narrative." Patrick stood. "Then we challenge it," he said. "We will," Asha replied. "But we need Quito's testimony to hold. And they'll say he's too traumatized." Quito stepped forward. "I can speak," he said. "I'm not broken." Patrick met his eyes, pride and fear colliding. "I know," he said, "but this isn't about strength. It's about safety." Kito's voice sharpened. Safety is not silence. The hearing was scheduled for the following morning, expedited with suspicious efficiency. The courtroom filled. Early journalists packed the benches. Activists clustered near the doors. Officials in tailored suits whispered in corners. Patrick arrived with Asha, Jean Bosco, Mama Salima, and Kito. The boy wore a simple shirt, clean and pressed the repaired necklace, resting against his chest. Asha had arranged for a jeweler to fix the clasp overnight. Kofi Bemba arrived last. He moved through the room, with ease greeting people by name, smiling with the confidence of a man accustomed to gravity bending toward him. He did not look at Patrick. He did not need to. The judge entered, expression unreadable. Proceedings began with formalities that felt like obstacles dressed as fairness. The state's counsel spoke first, voice smooth. "We are concerned about the child's welfare," he said. "He has been exposed to media attention, violence, and undue influence by a powerful adult with a personal stake." Patrick listened, hands steady on the table. He waited. Asha rose. "We object," she said calmly. "The state's actions have repeatedly endangered this child. There is documented evidence of attempted unlawful removal, intimidation, and..." The judge raised a hand. "We'll hear from the child," she said, briefly. Kito stood. The courtroom shifted. He did not rush. He did not shrink. He held the rail, steadying himself, and spoke in a voice that carried without strain. "My name is Patrick Tshisekedi," he said. "I am here because people tried to erase my mother, and when I spoke, they tried to erase me." A murmur rippled. "I am afraid," Kito continued, "but I am more afraid of being sent somewhere quiet where no one hears me." The judge leaned forward. "Do you feel coerced to speak?" Kito shook his head. "I asked to," he said, "because silence is how they hurt us." He lifted the necklace slightly. "My mother told me to remember. This is how I do." The judge studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you," she said. Coffey's counsel rose, face composed. "Your Honor, this is tragic," he said. "But we must separate emotion from evidence. My client denies all allegations." The judge's gaze hardened. "Evidence will speak," she replied. "Sit down." Outside the courtroom, tension snapped like wire. The hearing recessed without a decision granting temporary protection orders, but delaying final custody. It was not victory. It was time. Time proved costly. That evening, Asha received a call that chilled the room. "The border clinic is being pressured," she said. "Officials are questioning records, asking staff to revise dates." Patrick felt anger flare. "They're trying to erase her again." "Yes," Asha said. "We need to move fast." A plan formed quickly, risky and necessary. They would bring Elise home, not publicly, not triumphantly, but quietly, protected by law and witnesses. Asha coordinated with international observers. Patrick leveraged contacts he had once avoided using this way. Kito sat with Patrick late into the night, the house quiet around them. "What if she's angry?" Kito asked. "What if she doesn't want to see me?" Patrick considered the question with care. "Then we honor that," he said. "Love doesn't force." Kito nodded, eyes shining. "She won't," he said softly. "She promised." Morning brought a setback. Jean Bosco's phone rang with a single sentence before the line went dead. "You've done enough." His workshop was burned to the ground by noon. No one was hurt. The message was clear. Jean Bosco stood amid the ashes, face ashen. "I won't stop," he said when Patrick reached him. Patrick placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won't stand alone," he said. The prosecutor's office announced delays pending review. Files disappeared. A clerk recanted. Another fell ill. The case strained under the weight of invisible hands. That night, Patrick received a visit. Kofi Bemba arrived unannounced at the gate, security cameras capturing his calm approach. Patrick stepped outside alone, the air thick with unspoken threat. "You should end this," Kofi said, voice pleasant. You're hurting people. Patrick held his gaze. You mean you're losing control? Kofi smiled thinly. Power always finds balance. Patrick's voice was steady. Not this time. Kofi's eyes flicked to the house. Children break, he said softly. Under pressure. Patrick stepped closer. So do lies, he said, and they cut deeper. Kofi's smile vanished. He turned and left, the night swallowing him. The next day, the judge issued a directive, a full evidentiary hearing within 48 hours. All witnesses to be protected. International observers invited. The courtroom would be open. Pressure cut both ways. As the city buzzed, Patrick sat with Quito in the hospital room where it had begun. The boy traced the necklace's curve. Do you think it ends soon? Quito asked. Patrick shook his head. I think it changes, he said. Endings are quieter. Quito nodded. I can be quiet, he said, but I won't disappear. Patrick smiled, pride warming his chest. You don't have to, he said. That evening, a secure call connected them to Elise. The screen flickered, then steadied. She appeared thinner, paler, but unmistakably herself. Her eyes found Quito's immediately. My love, she whispered. Quito's breath caught. Mama. Patrick stepped back, giving them space. Elise's gaze lifted to him. Gratitude and sorrow mingled. You didn't fail us, she said softly. You found us. Patrick swallowed hard. I'm here, he said. The call ended with plans made and precautions doubled. The hearing loomed like a storm. As night fell, Patrick stood at the window, the city's lights shimmering. He understood. Now justice was not a single act, but a series of choices made under pressure. Tomorrow those choices would be tested, and this time the truth would not be alone. The city held its breath. On the morning of the evidentiary hearing, clouds gathered without rain, turning the light flat and unforgiving. The courthouse steps filled, early journalists with microphones, market women with folded arms, students with placards handwritten through the night. Police lines were present, but thin, stretched by a demand for order that had arrived too late to feel sincere. Patrick Tshisekedi arrived quietly through a side entrance. He wore a simple dark suit. No pin, no flourish. Power had taught him that spectacle weakened resolve. Inside, the corridors hummed with whispers and the soft friction of paperwork. Asha Mwangi walked beside him. Posture steady, eyes alert. John Bosco followed with a bandage still visible on his forearm, evidence of a night he refused to forget. Mama Salima leaned on her cane. Chin lifted her presence, a promise. Quito walked between Patrick and Asha. He had slept little. Neither had Patrick. Still, the boy's steps were even. The necklace rested against his chest-repaired clasp, catching the light. Patrick had offered to carry it. Quito had refused. If they see it. Quito had said they remember why we're here. They took their seats as the judge entered, her expression composed, unreadable. International observers filled a row near the front, their notebooks open, pens poised. The prosecutor stood. Kofi Bemba's counsel stood opposite, immaculate and smiling, a man who had argued truth into knots for decades. The judge called the room to order. The prosecutor began with the evidence, timelines, payments, properties, shell companies. Charts rose on screens. Names connected like constellations that had always been there unseen, until someone bothered to look up. Kofi's counsel objected early, and often voice smooth. Speculation, he said. Circumstantial, prejudicial. The judge overruled him without irritation. We'll hear the witnesses, she said. Mama Salima went first. She stood, with effort, her cane tapping once against the floor before she steadied herself. Her voice was soft, but it did not waver. She spoke of the night Elise arrived, of the men who came later, of the words used to make fear sound like care. They said silence was protection, Mama Salima said. But silence is a grave. The room was quiet enough to hear the ceiling fan click. Kofi's counsel rose polite. Nurse, he said you're elderly. Memory can blur. Are you certain? I am certain, Mama Salima replied, eyes sharp. Because I wrote it down. Because I cried. Because I never forgot. Documents were entered. Dates aligned. Jean Bosco followed. He described the drive, the route chosen by men who knew where cameras slept, the envelope pressed into his hand, the warning delivered without threat, because it didn't need one. When counsel attempted to undermine him, Jean Bosco lifted his chin. "You burned my shop," he said, looking straight ahead. "You don't scare me anymore." A ripple moved through the room. Then it was Quito's turn. Patrick felt his chest tighten as the boy stood. He did not look at Coffee. He looked at the judge. "My mother taught me to count," Quito said. "Not money, time, our breaths, places, so I wouldn't forget." He spoke of the warehouse, of Father Gideon's voice, of the van doors closing. He spoke of the day he was taken from the shelter in daylight, of Patrick falling, of the necklace breaking. Coffee's counsel leaned in. "You're saying a powerful man orchestrated all this," he said. "Why would he care about you?" Quito's eyes did not flicker. "Because my mother wouldn't be quiet," he said. "And because truth costs." The judge nodded. "Thank you," she said gently. "You may sit." Coffee's counsel stood smoothing his jacket. "Your Honor," he said, "this is theater. Emotion. My client has not been placed at the scene of any crime." The prosecutor rose. "We have footage," she said, "from the hospital corridor, from the warehouse perimeter, from toll cameras, and we have a voice." The room shifted. Audio played Coffee's voice unmistakable, clipped in certain issuing instructions he had believed unrecorded. Silence followed, heavy and complete. Coffee stood. "I object," he said, smile gone. "This is illegal." The judge's gaze hardened. "Sit down," she said. Coffee did not. Patrick felt the room lean toward the edge of something sharp. Coffee turned, scanning the benches, the cameras, the observers. He weighed options quickly. Then he smiled again, thin, defiant. "You think this ends me?" Coffee said. "Power doesn't end. It relocates." The judge raised her hand. "Bailiff!" she said. As officers moved forward, Coffee's composure cracked for the first time. "You'll regret this," he said, voice rising. "Children get hurt when adults play games." Patrick stood. He did not shout. He did not threaten. "You don't get to hide behind children anymore," he said. Coffee was escorted out, still speaking, still bargaining with a room that had stopped listening. The judge recessed briefly, then returned. Her ruling was measured and devastating. Charges would proceed. Assets frozen. Protective orders expanded. Witness protection activated. A special prosecutor appointed. Outside, the crowd erupted, not with celebration, but with release. People cried. People argued. People filmed. The city exhaled a truth it had been holding. That afternoon, retaliation arrived quietly. Asha received word that a false emergency petition had been filed, one last attempt to separate Quito from Patrick pending further review. Patrick laughed, once tired and sharp. "They're out of time," he said. But time had not finished collecting its toll. As evening fell, the safe house lights flickered. Asha's phone rang. She listened, face tightening. "Elise's transport has been delayed," she said. "Border pressure, unscheduled inspections." Patrick closed his eyes. "They're stalling." "Yes," Asha said. "We need to reroute." Quito stood nearby, listening. "They won't stop," he said. Patrick met his gaze. "Neither will we." They moved plans, shifting routes and times. International observers intervened. Paperwork that had once been a weapon became a shield. Night deepened. At the hospital where Patrick had first woken after the rescue, a small vigil formed Market Women Clinic staff, students, people who had watched the story unfold and refused to look away. Candles flickered in jars. Someone sang softly. Patrick stood at the edge, Quito beside him. "Are you tired?" Patrick asked. Quito nodded. "But I'm still here," he said. Patrick smiled. "Me too." Just before midnight, a secure message arrived. "She's through." Patrick's breath caught. He showed Quito. The boy's hands shook. "She's coming?" Quito asked. "Yes," Patrick said. "Soon." They returned to the safe house, hearts racing, nerves raw. Sleep refused to come. At dawn, a convoy pulled in quietly. Asha stepped forward, eyes bright with relief. Elise stepped out slowly, thinner than Patrick remembered, wrapped in a simple coat. She paused, scanning as if afraid the ground might shift beneath her. Quito broke into a run. "Mama," he cried. Elise dropped to her knees, arms opening. "My love," she whispered, voice breaking. They held each other as if letting go would undo the world. Patrick stood back, tears blurring his vision. Elise lifted her head and met his eyes. "Thank you," she said, not as absolution, but as truth. Patrick nodded. "I'm here," he replied. "I should have been sooner." Elise shook her head gently. "You came when it mattered," she said. As they moved inside, Asha closed the door softly. Outside, the city stirred awake to a new day, one that did not promise ease but offered something rarer: accountability. And inside, 3 people who had been scattered by power sat together at last, knowing the hardest part was nearly done. The darkest hour had passed, but the reckoning was not finished yet. The city woke to a different kind of noise. It wasn't celebration. It was the sound of doors opening, courtrooms, offices, archives that had been sealed by habit and fear. Papers moved, phones rang. Men who had slept well for years discovered insomnia. Patrick Tshisekedi stood in the safe house kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug he had forgotten to drink from listening to Asha Mwangi outline the day. Her voice was precise, but beneath it ran a current of urgency. "The public hearing is at 10, she said. "Livestream, full access. International observers confirmed. The special prosecutor will lead." Patrick nodded. "And coffee in custody," Asha replied. "His team is pushing for procedural delays. They'll argue contamination again." Patrick glanced toward the living room, where Elise sat on the sofa with a blanket around her shoulders. Quito pressed close at her side. She looked smaller than memory, but steadier than fear. She met Patrick's eyes and gave a slight nod. "Ready?" Patrick asked softly. Elise inhaled. "I've been ready for years," she said. The courthouse was already packed when they arrived. The crowd outside was quieter than it had been days earlier, watchful as if aware that something irreversible was about to happen. Inside, the atmosphere was electric but restrained. Cameras were fixed, notebooks open. The judge entered without ceremony. Proceedings moved swiftly. The special prosecutor laid out the case with a clarity that left little room to hide. Evidence was presented, in sequence: financial trails, recorded instructions, transport logs, the hospital footage. Each piece alone was troubling. Together, they were devastating. Kofi Bemba sat at the defense table, posture rigid, eyes calculating. When the audio played again, his voice issuing orders he had never meant for daylight, something in the room shifted. The murmurs died. The truth settled like weight. Then Elise stood. The room seemed to lean toward her. She did not rush. She did not dramatize. She spoke the way she had always lived, measured, thoughtful, refusing to give fear more attention than it deserved. "I was warned," Elise said. "Not once. Many times. I was told my child would be safer if I disappeared. I was told silence was protection." She paused, eyes scanning the benches, the cameras, the faces that had once judged her without knowing. "Silence is not protection," she said. "It is a weapon." Kofi's counsel rose, ready with objections that had worked before. The judge lifted a hand. "Let her speak," she said. Elise continued. She described the threats, the forced moves, the night she gave birth under watchful eyes. She spoke of the men who counted her breaths, the promises that came with conditions, the isolation that hollowed her days. She spoke of the necklace, not as jewelry but as a tether to truth. I believed it would lead someone back, she said. I believed the truth would gather witnesses. Her gaze found Patrick for a heartbeat, not for absolution but acknowledgement. He nodded, throat tight. Quito stood next. He did not need to. The judge had already heard him. But he asked to speak again, and the judge granted it. They tried to take me, because I remembered, Quito said. They said I was dangerous because I spoke. He lifted the necklace slightly, the repaired clasp catching the light. This broke when they pulled me away, he said. It didn't break me. The prosecutor rested her case. Coffey's counsel stood for the defense, voice sharpened by urgency. He argued influence, misinterpretation, coincidence. He spoke of reputations and instability. He tried to scatter what had been gathered. It did not work. The judge recessed briefly, then returned. Her ruling was firm, precise, and public. Charges would proceed to trial without delay. Bail denied. Asset freezes upheld. Protective measures expanded to include all named witnesses. An independent commission would investigate the agencies implicated. Coffey rose again, anger breaking through composure. This is politics, he snapped. You'll regret. The judge's gavel cut the air. You will address this court with respect, she said, or you will not address it at all. Officers approached. Coffey sat. Outside, the city absorbed the ruling like a deep breath. Some cheered quietly, others simply nodded as if something heavy had been set down. But the day was not finished. At the steps, Patrick faced the cameras he had avoided for weeks. He did not posture. He did not rehearse. He spoke plainly. I failed once by believing silence would keep peace, he said. It doesn't. Peace requires truth, and truth requires witnesses. He stepped aside and gestured to Elise and Quito, not as symbols but as people. They are not my redemption, he said. They are my responsibility. Questions flew. Patrick answered a few, then stopped. The rest belongs in court, he said. As they turned to leave, a ripple moved through the crowd. Someone began to clap, slow, unsure. Others joined not in triumph, but in recognition. That evening, the safe house filled with quiet. Mama Salima arrived with a small bag and a smile that trembled at the edges. I wanted to see them together, she said. Elise embraced her, tears finally spilling. You saved us, Elise whispered. Mama Salima shook her head. You saved yourselves, she replied. I just remembered. Patrick sat at the table with Asha, exhaustion settling into his bones. It's not over, he said. No, Asha agreed, but it's real now. Later, as the house dimmed and sleep approached cautiously, Quito sat with Patrick on the steps outside. The city lights shimmered softer tonight. Is it done? Quito asked. Patrick considered the question carefully. The hardest part is done, he said. What comes next is building. Quito nodded. Can we build something that doesn't break? He asked. Patrick smiled, a small, honest thing. We can try, he said. And when it cracks, we fix it. Quito leaned into him, tired at last. Patrick rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the steady proof of presence. Inside, Elise watched them through the window, a quiet peace settling where fear had lived too long. She touched the place at her neck where the necklace had once rested, then looked toward the future it had finally found. That night, warrants multiplied. Networks unraveled. The men who had counted on distance and delay found neither. And in the city's low hum, something shifted. Not to perfection, but to possibility. The truth had spoken aloud, and it had been heard. The city did not change overnight. Justice rarely arrived with fireworks. It came with paperwork, patience, and people willing to stay when attention drifted. In the weeks after the ruling, Patrick Tshisekedi learned the cost of staying. Meetings stretched late into nights thick with fatigue. Lawyers argued over details that mattered because details were where harm hid. Inspectors returned to places long ignored and asked questions that refused to be softened. Kofi Bemba's influence receded the way a tide does slowly, grudgingly, leaving behind debris that had to be cleared by hand. More arrests followed, boards dissolved, agencies restructured under scrutiny they could not evade. A special prosecutor's office expanded its mandate, reaching into corners that had learned to expect darkness. Patrick did not attend every hearing. He attended the ones that mattered most. He learned when to step back and when to stand firm. Power, he discovered, was quieter when it was finally accountable. At home, the safe house that had become something like a harbor, Elise focused on healing that did not announce itself. She slept. She ate slowly. She walked the garden in the mornings, hand-brushing leaves as if to reassure herself that things could grow again. At first, she startled at sounds. Then gradually, she didn't. Quito watched her with the vigilance of someone who had learned how quickly safety could be taken away. He did not cling. He stayed close. He asked questions at night and accepted silence when answers were not ready. Patrick learned to wait. They began therapy together, the three of them in a quiet room with wide windows. Some sessions were raw. Others felt ordinary, which surprised them all. Ordinary was a gift. One afternoon, Elise turned to Patrick and said, "I don't want revenge." Patrick nodded. "Neither do I. I want repair," she continued, "for what they broke." Patrick considered the word. "Repair. Then let's build that," he said. They started with the children. The shelter was expanded not as Patrick's project but as a community trust. Market women sat on the oversight board. Clinic workers rotated in. Asha insisted on transparency that made donors uncomfortable, and therefore honest. Quito helped choose the rules, insisting on one above all: no child would be moved without consent and witnesses. Patrick funded it. Then he stepped back. A foundation followed, not named for him, not named for Elise. It bore a simple name chosen by the children: Open Hands. Its mission was narrow and relentless protection. First care, second opportunity, always. It funded legal aid, mental health services, and education pathways that did not punish children for surviving. Patrick attended the opening and spoke briefly. "This is not charity," he said. "It's restitution." Elise stood beside him, steady. Quito held the scissors and cut the ribbon himself. The necklace became a question they did not rush to answer. For weeks it sat in a small box on the table, its repaired clasp catching the light. One evening, as dusk softened the room, Quito took it out and turned it over. "Mama," he said. "Do you want it back?" Elise studied the chain eyes, warm with memory and resolve. "I want you to have it," she said. "It kept you safe." Quito frowned. "It didn't," he said honestly. "People wanted it." Elise smiled. "It kept you remembered," she replied. "That matters more." Quito considered this. Then he handed the necklace to Patrick. "You keep it," he said, "until we decide." Patrick accepted it with care. "Together," he said. Weeks later, they visited the river. It was not a ceremony, not a performance. Just the three of them, shoes off water, moving in patient lines. Patrick held the necklace in his palm. "This carried promises," he said. "Some I broke." Elise shook her head, gently. "You didn't know," she said. "And then you chose to know." Quito watched the water. "What happens to it now?" he asked. Patrick looked at Elise. Elise nodded once. Patrick stepped forward and let the necklace slip into the river. It flashed once, then disappeared. Not as loss, but as release. Quito inhaled. "We'll remember without it," he said. "Yes," Elise replied. "We will." Life found its new shape in small proofs. Keto returned to school with a backpack chosen by himself and books that smelled like possibility. He struggled at first, quiet in class, restless at recess, but he learned. He learned to ask for help without shame. He learned that not every raised voice meant danger. Patrick attended parent meetings awkward and earnest. He learned when to listen and when to advocate. He learned that presence was not an act but a practice. Elise took a part-time role with open hands, designing protocols that protected women who needed time, not questions. She insisted on exit plans that did not end at doors. Asha watched it all with a satisfied quiet. "You're doing the work," she told Patrick one evening. "That's rare." Patrick smiled tiredly. "I'm learning." The trial progressed with the slowness of things done right. Coffee's defenses thinned. His posture collapsed into something smaller than the man Patrick had once known. Sentences were handed down. Appeals denied. The network's reach snapped into fragments that could no longer hold weight. On the day the final verdict was announced, Patrick did not go to court. He sat in the schoolyard watching Keto kick a ball with other children. Laughter rose uncomplicated and bright. Elise joined him on the bench. "Do you feel finished?" she asked. Patrick considered the question. "I feel committed," he said. She nodded. "That's better." As evening fell, they returned home to a house that felt earned. Dinner was noisy, homework spread across the table. Asha stopped by with news of another grant approved, another clinic funded. Later, as the city settled, Keto sat beside Patrick on the steps. "Will people forget?" Keto asked. Patrick thought of headlines and cycles. "Some will," he said, "but the work won't." Keto nodded. "I don't want to be famous," he said. Patrick smiled. "You don't have to be," he replied. "You just have to be free." Keto leaned back content. "I think I am," he said. Inside, Elise turned off lights one by one, the house easing into rest. She paused at the doorway and looked back at them. The picture, ordinary and precious. Patrick felt the weight of the months lift, not disappear, but settle into something he could carry. They had not erased the past. They had answered it. They had not chased perfection. They had chosen repair. And in a city that had learned to move on without looking back, 3 people stood still, long enough to build something that could last.
Some truths don't arrive with noise. They wait, quiet, patient, until someone is brave enough to stop walking past them. This story reminds us that power is not proven by how much control we hold, but by how much responsibility we are willing to carry. Patrick did not become a better man because he was wealthy. He became better because he chose to listen when silence was easier. Elise survived, not because she was protected by systems, but because she protected her child with memory, courage, and truth. And Keto teaches us something even deeper, that dignity does not come from being rescued, but from refusing to disappear when the world tries to erase you. Real justice is not revenge, it is repair. It is showing up again and again, even when the applause fades. It is choosing accountability over comfort and healing over pride. Most of all, it is understanding that kindness is not weakness, it is the beginning of change. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Whose pain have you been walking past without seeing, and what would happen if you stopped? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters more than you think. And if you believe stories like this, stories of truth, healing, and hope, deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stay with us because there are many more voices waiting to be heard.